Do you know what it means to be confident or to feel like you're confident? Well, confident just means that I feel ready for the everyday challenges that are in front of me. So things like, I don't know, tests or competitions or performances, I feel ready for those on the inside. It means thinking I can instead of I can't. Do you know what it feels like to be confident? Do you know what it feels like not to be confident? When suddenly you stop thinking I can and you start thinking I can't. It's not so easy to stop that, right? Well, I'm going to tell you a story about someone in the Bible who looked like he was confident a whole lot of the time. But actually, he wasn't. Here's the story. My name's Peter, but you can call me Pete. That's what my friends call me anyway. I'm a fisherman. I've been a fisherman as long as I can remember. My father was a fisherman. His dad was a fisherman. I know nothing other than fishing. When I was a little boy, like every other Jewish boy, I had to go to the synagogue. I guess it's probably something like your church. I had to go to the synagogue every single day to learn the really important things about my faith. And if you were really, really good at that, if you were really, really clever at that, you carried on. But when I got to about 9 or 10, they realized I wasn't so good at that stuff. And so I went back to work for my dad. And that's where I became a fisherman. And you know what? I'm a really, really good fisherman. Now, there are a few things as you probably need to know about me before I tell you my story. Well, the first thing is I'm really loud a lot of the time. And when I'm not so sure of myself, when I think about things and when I think that other people might think I'm weak or might think I can't do something, do you know what I do? I get really loud and I say stupid things. Well, I don't always say stupid things, but most of the time, stupid things come out. And I could give you lots of examples about that, but we don't have that much time. The other thing about me is, like I said, I couldn't stay on at school. I had to go and become a fisherman with my dad. Now, that wasn't unusual. Most boys had to do what I did. But the really clever ones, they would grow up and then they would start learning from someone who was called a rabbi. Now, a rabbi was just kind of like a teacher who was really, really good at knowing things about the Holy Scriptures and things like that, okay? And what was really important about that is you got a name for that. You see, the rabbi was the teacher and the disciple was the person who learned. Now, there was something really important about being a disciple or following a rabbi. You had to believe that if the rabbi did something, you could do it. If he taught you something, you had to remember it. But if he did something, you had to be able to do it. You had to copy him. That's what it meant to be a disciple. You copied the rabbi. Now, I'm a fisherman. I copied my dad. I learned to be a really good fisherman. When I was about 30, I met someone who was totally different to every other person I'd ever met. His name was Jesus. And Jesus was special. He was a rabbi, but he was also a carpenter, which is amazing. Jesus, the things that he used to say and the things that he used to do were just mind-boggling. They were amazing. And one day, Jesus came to my boat and he said to me, I want you to be one of my followers. I want you to be a disciple of mine. Me. Smelly old me. A fisherman. Jesus wanted me to be one of his disciples. But when Jesus said it, it made all the sense in the world. The way Jesus spoke made me feel like I could do anything. So I said yes. And the moment I said yes, I started to teach myself to believe that anything Jesus could do, I could do as well. Because that's how you followed your rabbi. And Jesus trusted me a whole lot. But I saw him do some really incredible things. Oh man, the things Jesus did. The first thing I remember seeing him do was we went to this wedding and he turned water into wine. And then soon after that, there was a little girl who was really, really sick. She was so sick she died. And you know what? Jesus brought her back to life. Amazing. But all the time I'm thinking in my head, I'm supposed to be able to do all those things. I'm supposed to be able to say, I can do that. But inside, I kept saying, I can't. So there was one day, we had been traveling for days and days and days. And wherever Jesus went, there were humongous crowds all around him because of the things he would say and how he would heal people. And they followed him everywhere. And I got to be honest with you, me and the guys, there were about 12 of us. We were tired. We'd worked really hard for weeks and weeks. And then this one day we came to the shore and we were going to go across from one beach to another beach across a really big lake. And this whole crowd appeared. And we were really cross with them. But Jesus, he didn't get like that. He sat them down and he spoke to them and he told jokes and he taught them amazing things and he healed people. And at about lunchtime, there wasn't enough food for everyone in the crowd. So Jesus did this amazing miracle where he took, and a miracle is just something amazing. It's not magic. It's something that God does. And he took bread and some fish and he broke it and he made it go round to everyone. It was amazing. Just a few loaves of bread and 2 fish, and everyone had enough to eat. And at the end of the day, me and the guys were really, really tired, and Jesus could see it. And so he came over to us and he said, hey guys, why don't you get on to the boat and go to the other side of the lake? I'll meet you there. We thought that was a bit strange. How was he going to get there? But you know, we listened to him because he was our rabbi. He was the boss. So we got onto the boat and we started rowing out, and as we rowed out, we could see Jesus still talking to the crowd, and he started to send them home. And by the time we got sort of the middle of the lake, we kind of stopped rowing and we were just enjoying bobbing in the water. And Jesus, well, he had gone to pray. He'd gone to speak to God, which is something he did a lot. And we kept rowing and rowing, and it got to really late in the night. In fact, it was early in the morning. It was about 3 o'clock. But all the time we were rowing and rowing to get to the other side, the wind picked up and it started to get really windy. And you know what happens when you're on a lake or on the sea and there's lots of wind? Well, the waves got bigger and bigger. Now, I'm a fisherman. Little waves don't scare me very much. Medium-sized waves don't scare me very much. But these waves, they were huge, and we were in a tiny little boat, and we were going up and down, and we were being thrown all around, and I was scared. For the first time in my life, I was on a boat and I was scared. I thought this was it. And so we tried really hard to just see if we could get to the other side before we were overturned and landed up in the water and ended up drowning. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. My hands were on the oars, and I was pulling to try and make sure we stayed, and everyone else was working really, really hard. And just in the distance, we saw a dot on the water, which was unusual. You didn't really see stuff like that on the water in the middle of the night, and it got bigger and bigger, and as it came closer, I realized that it was a ghost. And the other guys who saw it thought it was a ghost, and now we were scared of the waves, but we were also scared of the ghost. We didn't know what it was. We'd heard stories about ghosts on the water and people who had drowned and their ghosts came up, and we'd heard all of those things, like I'm sure you've heard about stuff like that. And we were really, really terrified. And that's when the ghost spoke. Whoa, guys, it's me, Jesus. You don't need to be scared. When I heard those words, I really couldn't believe them. I still thought it was a ghost, and that's when something clicked in my brain. Now you'll remember, I said, if I was a follower of rabbi, if I was a disciple, I had to believe that if he could do something, I could do something. And you'll remember that I said when I get scared, I say and do stupid things. Well, this is one of those times. I called out to him. I said, Jesus, if it's really you, tell me to come and join you. And Jesus said, hey, Pete, come. I could not believe he told me to come. At first I scratched my head, I wiped my forehead, but I was so wet. I went to the edge of the boat. All the other guys looked at me like I was absolutely nuts, like something had gone wrong with my head. I looked at the edge of the boat, I looked at the water going, and I thought, well, if it is Jesus, he said I could do it. If it isn't, I'm probably going to die anyway. So I lifted my left leg and I put it over the boat, and I put it on the water, and the most amazing thing happened. Firstly, my foot didn't get wet. It went to the top of the water, and it was like standing on grass. It was firm. It was perfect. So I stepped down and I put my other foot on the water. And there I was. I was standing on the water. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I could actually do this. And I saw Jesus ahead of me, and I didn't run because I was still a little bit scared. I started to walk. I started to walk slowly, baby steps, towards Jesus. And as I walked, my steps got bigger and bigger, and eventually I was just walking like a normal dude walking down the street. And it was amazing. And I started looking around me, and I looked at Jesus, and then I saw how big the waves were around me. And even though I felt like I was walking on the ground, the waves were way, way above my head. And that's when I got scared. I started looking at the waves, and I stopped looking at Jesus, and I looked down at my feet, and suddenly my feet started to get wet, and I started to go under the water. And before I knew it, I only had an arm and my head out, and I said, Jesus, grab me, please. And Jesus walked over to me, put his hand up, grabbed me, put his arm around me, and held me up. And he looked at me and he said, oh, you little chicken, why did you lose your confidence? Why did you stop believing that you could do it? And then he helped me back onto the boat. And we all just sat and were absolutely amazed as the water just calmed down, like there had never ever been a storm before. I really, really couldn't believe it. Here's what I want you to remember about that story. Remember that Peter, being one of Jesus' disciples, meant that Jesus believed that Peter could do anything that he did. That's really exactly how he looked at things. And for a moment, Peter did believe it. And then he lost his confidence. He went from saying, I can, to I can't. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever gone from I can to I can't? Maybe there was a big challenge in front of you. Maybe it was something you'd always been able to do, and suddenly you can't do it. You lose your confidence. The Bible tells us that he's made us all wonderfully. And even though sometimes we feel like we can't, he knows we can. He knows we can. He knows we can have the confidence to believe in him. He knows we can have the confidence to do all the wonderful things he created us to do, because he made us that way. And he promises that if we'll let him, he will show us how completely powerful he is to help us. Completely means everything, totally. And if we'll just let him, he'll show us how he can totally help us. So maybe you're feeling a little bit like I can't today. God says you can. So give it a try. And mostly, ask him for help. Like Peter did. When Peter didn't believe he could anymore, what did he do? He put out his hand and he said, Jesus, grab me. And what did Jesus do? He helped him completely. And God promises to do the same for us. Thanks for listening.